everybody, and welcome to a very special show today. Why is that up? That shouldn't be up. That should go away. How are you all? The discussions about pizza is... let's just say that's one of my weaknesses. Wouldn't you let me know what the audio quality is like, if you please? It is something that, for some unknown reason, things seem to have changed on my system, which is weird because nothing's changed. Anyway, as long as the audio is good, then I'm absolutely happy. It's a very full show today. There's some really cool things happening. There's some new partnerships coming through. There's just a whole bunch of fun stuff, which I hope will be of value and interest to you. We have a giveaway, a very, very special giveaway in honor and celebration of today. So that's definitely something that we're going to be looking at. I see the audio is a little bit soft. Let me drag that up a little bit. Hopefully that's now better for you. And yeah, hopefully that will work for you. Of course, we're going to be looking at your questions. I see they're already starting to come through. Hold on to those questions for just a little bit as I go through the processes of today's show. We're going to look at some very cool things, and first for the channel, which I think is a lot of fun. Some people were logging in from Finland. I'm super impressed. It's super early in Finland. Nice to have you here, Sunflamer. So yes, right, let's get onto some cool stuff. I spoke about it last time, but now it's definitely coming up. Legendary Kingdoms, the Valley of Bones. I'm really excited to play through this. This is a choose your own adventure book, which looks very similar to Fabled Lands. I spoke to the designers, that's Spider Mind Games, and they were big fans of Fabled Lands and came up with this. What makes it different, of course, is you play a party of 4. You play a party of 4. So that's interesting. And they've got a magic system. There's actually spells and things. So I will be looking at this as a podcast in upcoming podcasts. We're finishing off the live play that I was doing with some of the Patreons in that post-apocalyptic future. So we'll be finishing off that. But episode 1 of this, The Valley of Bones, will be available to everybody so you can get a sense or a flavour of what's going on. What I particularly like about Choose Your Own Adventure books is that, well, you can play them on your own. So sometimes, yeah, you don't have people around, or you just want to wander off and have some fun. So that's what I like about Valley of the Bones. Coming up this month in October, and this is for you specifically, I need your feedback. We do a review series on this role-playing system. Adventures in Middle-earth, the Player's Guide, and they very kindly sent me the Lawmaster's Guide as well. We do a review on this. Now, I put together some friends, most of them you know already, but I have put together, we recorded it last week, I'm busy editing it as we go through. It's 4 videos, so over the month of October it will play out, and you get a hopefully in-depth overview of what the system's about, why you should be excited, and why it should be something that you pick up or that you don't touch. These reviews, although they are sponsored by the publishers, were impartial, and so yeah, there's something to look at. So Adventures in Middle-earth, October should be a fun month. I'm saying this now because I have to show the videos to the publisher. Obviously, I mean, if we're talking rubbish about the publisher, that's not on. We would never do that. We would only talk about failings of the system from a role-playing perspective. They've got to have a look at it, and then those videos are going to go live, probably, I'm hoping, from Sunday. So check out those if you are interested in alternative role-playing systems. Now, beyond this one, this was 5th edition based, but it's heavily tweaked. It doesn't feel like 5th edition. We then start to look at non-Dungeons & Dragons based content. However, speaking of non-Dungeons & Dragons based content, and I'm glad that Game Master's Vault is hovering around. You, sir, can't handle my feedback. I do like that. I do like that. We have taken a decision to launch the book, which I had up briefly and which I will bring back. We have taken a decision to launch a complete guide to nautical campaigns on Kickstarter. Now, the reason for this, we launched it on pre-sale, as many of you may know or may have already purchased, but it did not raise the amount of money that we were hoping to raise. It raised some very good money. The support for the book has been amazing. Oh, Adrian, thank you for that. We love you. Thank you. It has raised significant funding towards the artwork, but we want more artwork. We want more artwork, and artwork is expensive. So we are launching it on Kickstarter on today's show. Now, I have done many other companies' Kickstarter launches, and I have to say, for me, it's always been a little bit of a, yeah, well, here we go, off we launch it. This is the first time that we're doing it. We figured out a workaround in terms of Kickstarter. It's now coming to us in Japan. So I'm going to take you through that very briefly. And before I do that, though, let's answer some questions. That's why you guys are here. Let's get some questions going, and then we'll talk more about the Kickstarter and the book. So let your questions start to flow. Let us commune. And there they come. Boom, 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 boom. I love it. Absolutely love it. Right. Honorable 596 says, what role-playing nonsense can you come up with for a multi-classing tiefling who is a fiend-packed warlock, ancestral guardian, barbarian? I thought the character some time ago, but decided to go Storm Herald to get all of the fire. Well, fiend-packed ancestral guardian, I have to say it sounds to me like someone's ancestor became a fiend and is now being involved in that individual's life. I like to link things together that way. Call me obvious, but that's what I like to do. In terms of multi-classing, you know, I know of a few people who like to multi-class. I personally have never been one of them. If the system does not give you the flexibility enough to create a character that you want to create and you have to sort of glue stuff together, it can become problematic. 5th edition, I know, has rules on how to multi-class. I've played a multi-class character, and I have to say they were not as exciting as I thought they were going to be. There are other systems out there where there is no such thing as class, and your character advances in skills and powers and abilities and things as they so use them. So that's definitely something to look at. That might be an option as well. Let's go to an alternative for that matter. So yes, that's what I would do when I look at it that way. Roger B asks, is the ship battle distance slider you used in Saltmarsh available anywhere? Yes, it is. Yes, it will be. And yes, yes, yes. So Roger B, the slider you're talking about is part of the book, Complete Guide to Nautical Campaigns, which we're launching on Kickstarter today in today's show, for which there is a giveaway that's been very generously given to us by a surprise edition, which I quite like. So yes, it is available there, and then because of our partnerships with World Anvil and with Dungeon Fog, you will be able to find the tables, the ships, the maps, and the slider table itself on our website. Now that will happen as soon as the Kickstarter is finished and we start making materials available to everybody. So you will have to wait out for that one a little bit longer. Something that we're also going to make available during the Kickstarter, and someone might have to remind me, is I actually made, whilst I was with Game Master's Vault, I have it here, I actually made a 3D printable version of that slider with the ship scale at the top and nautical underwater scale at the bottom, and this little thing slides up and down. It is a separate print, and you just sort of put it in. I then painted it up to sort of look old and coppery, and then let me just slide this back on here. I included a northeast southwest compass with a little dial that turns. We'll make this STL file available to you. It'll be on the website, I'm sure. So if you do have a 3D printer, if you have access to a 3D printer, you can then use this slider. It works quite well. It's certainly very visual for the players to play with. Obviously, if you've got more than one ship involved, then it starts to become a little more complicated. But yes, all of this stuff will be made available. We don't believe that this kind of material should be locked away inside of a book. We want you to be able to use it. So there you are. Right, next question. Xander the Green, how to make owning a shop interesting and fun, but not to the point of overriding the main plot. That's a very good question. And you know, it does happen from time to time. I know people might be sitting there going, what? Who would own a shop? Why would you want to own a shop? Sometimes players take over things. I had a player who took over a brothel and started to turn it into a brothel / education centre for night workers, and a front for a giant smuggling ring as well. But that wasn't the main focus. So the question was, what kind of income, what kind of costs were involved? All those kinds of things started to creep in, and I needed to come up with those things on the fly. So in terms of how do you make running a shop interesting, the accounting minutiae is not interesting as far as I'm concerned. So even in a complete guide to nautical campaigns, and I will be harping on that book for the rest of the show, but even in that, we worked out the basic costs of ship operations and what would it cost on a monthly basis, so that at the end of every month, there is a bill for 600 gold pieces every month to keep the ship operational. I would recommend that you do a similar thing for your store, work out the store's operational costs out of game, and then present the player with it, and then work out what their potential income is based off of if they are hiring someone to then operate the store. Don't require the PCs to operate the store. That just locks them down and it gets very boring. You don't want to do that. You really, really, really don't. So avoid that as much as you can. Sunflamer asks, how do you stat monsters you scale up to party level? For example, a level 1 goblin versus a level 10 goblin, or ones you come up with on the spot. What abilities too? Any formulas or templates to apply? Sunflamer, beg your pardon, I cheat. I reskin other monsters. So if I want there to be a giant goblin brute who has huge muscles and he seems like he's a goblin mutant, and I've just kind of thrown that out in the middle of a session, if I even use monster stats, which I don't often, but if I do, or if I'm doing a live stream and there I have to use monster stats because that's how the mechanics of those online games work, I will then find, say, an ogre. Or if I wanted to be a particularly terrifying goblin, I would then find something, in this case, of equal value. So a level 10 monster, maybe that's something else. I don't know, maybe it's an ogre or this. Dylan Lowe, we thank you for that. Really do thank you for that. So yes, it's all about, I just reskin stuff. It's the fastest way, I think, of being able to come up with things on the fly. So a question from Dylan Lowe is, I need more flick in my life. Season 2 of Saltmarsh airing soon. Dylan, I've got bad news for you. But maybe it's good news. I don't know. Season 1 of Saltmarsh, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is the D&D stream that I was running on the D&D Twitch channel, that concluded. And we started Season 2, which is Descent into Avernus. And the characters are new characters. So Flick and all of his craziness, as well as Pinky, his octopi, are not part of the story, necessarily. But watch Descent into Avernus, you never know. There are throwbacks, there are linkages, and something to bear in mind, I think, because this is insightful, I think. When I was creating Season 2, I asked the players, did they want to carry their characters through, or did they want to make new characters? And there was some debate. There was a lot of discussions about how would a mermaid, how would a sea elf cope in Avernus, in this hellish environment. And the general consensus was that it would be very incongruous, it would be very difficult to believe. I was quite ready to have the second chance sailing down the River Styx and all the mayhem and chaos that went along with it. However, I am but one of a group of 6, and so I must respect the will of the 6. I then asked Kaora if Pinky could make an appearance, or if any of the characters for that matter could, because ultimately, as much as I would like to appease everybody, my players have to come first. And again, they went, maybe they should stay in their own storyline and let's do a new storyline. We've already started to get some amazing NPC characters coming through, Peppermint being the one that I won't forget anytime soon. That was an interesting twist, I must admit. If you don't know what I'm talking about, every Saturday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, every Saturday we run a show on twitch.tv/D&D. where we run through a game, a live game. It runs for 2 hours. It will be airing on our YouTube channel. Episode 1 airs next week. We have to wait 2 weeks after the original aired date, out of courtesy from Dungeons & Dragons allowing us to put it on our own channel. So it will be available on our own channel as well from next week. Next, Dracone asks, when making races for campaigns, how do you... No, it's gone. Let me try and find that question again. When making races for campaigns, what do you most suggest when making campaigns? Okay, well, if you are new to the show, just bear in mind, if you ask a question and I miss it, please ask it again, because they do fly through fast and then I can't see what's going on. So, when making new races for a campaign, what do I suggest? My immediate suggestion is why, and what are they going to be contributing or adding to that? What's the story? Why and how does it fit? That, I think, is the important thing. And if the answer is, well, they're part of the mythos, they're part of the culture, they're part of the environment, then that makes absolute sense. So if you look at my campaign creator series on YouTube, where we're creating this very Greco-Roman time, a very sort of ancient empires type of feel, then races like satyrs or playable centaurs, they start to become a little bit more obvious in terms of need. They do change the campaign quite dramatically, as you'll find out, I think, in one of the videos coming up in the next couple of weeks. But the idea is, if the race fits, that's okay. But if it's a race just because, then sometimes it doesn't work. So Descent into Avernus, for example, another good example, I think, is that Kaora came to me and he said he wants to play a male dryad. And we went, okay, what are the stats? What are the systems? How do we work this? And we're using Fantasy Grounds, which is a fantastic virtual tabletop, and I would always recommend it. I love it to bits in terms of what it allows me to do. It does not, and it does allow me to create unique races. It definitely does. But that's an incredibly large amount of administrative work. We were rushing. So I said to Kara, I said, listen, use the Furbolg as your race base, and we will call it a male dryad. So oftentimes I just reskin. Why reinvent the wheel if it's appropriate? So that's definitely something to think about. Remember, just because it's a breath weapon that breathes fire, there's nothing wrong with you changing it to it's a breath weapon that is, or it's not a breath weapon, it's a blast of air from the hands that is a bunch of thorns. Does the same damage, has the same range, has the same effect, just completely different. So I think definitely something to look at that way. All right, 2 more minutes for questions, and then we're going to move on to something else. Please put the word question in caps lock before your question so I can see it standing out. Quinton Walker says, any tips for a historical campaign? I've been thinking of running a 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons Green Book game. Wow, that takes me back. Either Crusades or Charlemagne's Paladins. Both would include some kingdom building. Well, Quinton, your biggest challenge when you're going back to something like Dungeons and Dragons is that magic is a big thing. Now, the Green Book, yes, they brought it out. They realized that people wanted to play more historical-based campaigns where then magic was removed. And, you know, I don't remember the minutiae of it because this is now 20 years ago. But yes, there was an option there. However, as an alternative, if you want to have some magic, or if you want to have a means for the players to be able to have their characters recover in a fairly logical way, a slightly faster way, I'm going to say it, I would actually have a look at picking up a copy of Adventures in Middle-earth. Now, the review's not out yet. That's coming out this month. But Middle-earth, if you think about it, magic is incredibly rare. And yes, there are elves and there are dwarves and the like, but take that away and you've basically got medieval England, which is what Tolkien was basing Middle-earth on anyway. The book, what I like about it, is that it extracts out the super magic, if you like, of D&D, and it replaces it. So instead of having wizard or a dedicated priest, you have a scholar, who's someone who has done a lot of reading and research, which to me is far more appropriate to a medieval game than having a priest or having a wizard. If you think about priests during the medieval era, they were either speaking the gospel in Latin or they were copying books. They weren't really going out necessarily and engaging. But if you have a scholar, that's someone who could be a healer. They don't do magic. There's no magic missile or anything like that. So that might be a way where you can use 5th edition, which I would argue a lot of people know how to play 5th edition. If you said to me, let's play 2nd Ed, I would have to go and read the rules again and remind myself how that works. But anyway, that's a different story. Right, next question. Grizzle says, will any Star Wars systems come up in these system tests? Well, it's a review more than a test. We look at it from different aspects. To be perfectly frank with you, Grizzles, the only way that this works is if we get the publisher of the book to sponsor the show. And I'll tell you why. We've got 3 or 4 GMs who get given the rulebook, and they get given a month to read that rulebook. This is not just a casual flip through. They have to read the rulebook. They have to create a character. Whoever is running the game has to create an adventure based off of the principal mechanics that book is using. So if you look at the Star Wars systems, I could do it very easily. I've played Star Wars D6, I've played Star Wars Saga, I've played Star Wars D20, and I've played Star Wars Fantasy Flight version, which I straight up don't like because of the dice. The rules I don't really have a problem with. It's the dice that I don't like. I don't like iconography. So I could do that easily. But if you had never encountered it before, you have a month within which to do this. And I feel it's only right. These are people who make their living by reviewing games, by running their own YouTube channels and things. So we have to pay them. So long and short of it is, if the publisher comes to the table and says, yes, let's do this, then we will review the system. And I know it sounds almost like they're trying to buy it, but I think you'll see with Adventures in Middle-earth, the scorecard is pretty neutral in terms of, it doesn't matter what people are saying. If it scores, it scores. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. So that's something to bear in mind. Next question, and then we're going to stop after that. Honorable 596, have you ever run a game in a mad carnival full of hideous freaks, monsters, and others? I have not. The closest I've come is where the characters have encountered a circus with strange characters in it, and those characters became their friends. And that was for a save or dice game, the Kairos Stones, actually. They came across a circus, and then they started to run the circus themselves, but it was never a main feature. I must admit, I'm not a huge fan of the circus, to be perfectly honest with you. Because I'm not a huge fan of theatre. Don't shoot me. I like close-ups and dramatic moments and stuff, and you can't get that in the theatre. Anyway, that's a whole different story. Right. Steve Vademi says, thinking of running the Essentials kit for my mom's birthday. It will be my first time as a Dungeon Master. Any tips for a new DM? Yes. First and foremost, take your time and just relax. If you've got the Essentials kit, I haven't had a close look at what's in there, but it's the essentials. It will help you. It will guide you. Keep your stories simple. Don't try and overcomplicate. Quite literally, think of a problem and then present that problem to your players and let them work through it, let them overcome it, and then present them with another problem until eventually it gets to a point where they resolve the biggest thing. So bear that in mind. Keep that in the back of your head. Don't try and overdo it. So many people do, where they try and cram in everything. Just slow, and you must have as much fun as they are. That's the other important thing. And if you don't know a rule, make a call on the fly, make a decision, and then later after the game go back and have a look. All right. Now, excuse me, I need to just clear my throat here. Something's going on. Okay, it is nearly the half hour, which is what I want to now segue. So hold your questions, please. Hold your questions. I will come back to questions. Definitely will come back to questions. We've got some great questions coming in today, which I think is absolutely wonderful. Now, this is something that we haven't done before from the channel's perspective. I am going to now launch the Kickstarter. So let me take you through the Kickstarter first so that you can have a look and see. This is the Kickstarter that we've put together. There's a video here which explains pretty much everything that's in the book. And it is in yen from my perspective because I am in Japan. And don't worry, we're not looking for $1.8 million. This is in yen. So depending on what country you live in, that number changes significantly. But because I'm in Japan, it shows me yen. So yes, this is the book. This is everything. We explain everything. As most people may or may not know, it's already written. This is, as I labeled it, the most boring image on Kickstarter. The table of contents. There are 5.5 pages of contents worth of tables. There's 140 pages in material. And it ranges from new races, new roles aboard the ship, more crew rules, ship abilities. And there's a little video where I talk about the ship abilities, ship scores, ship combat, ship actions. This is for 5th edition. It really is for 5th edition. But as we were writing these rules, Game Master's Vault was my developmental editor. He was sitting there challenging all the rules that we came up with, sort of looking at them. As we were writing them, we realized, aside from a few D&D linked things, this would actually work in Pathfinder. It would work in almost any system where there are contested roles, because that's pretty much what it's boiled down to. We've got fleet rules. So if you have a fleet of ships, this will work. There's 29 unique ships. We're hoping to add more. That's part of the reason for the Kickstarter. We want illustrations for each of those ships. Those illustrations cost. There's rules on shipbuilding. There's rules on ship upgrades, how to make Titanic monsters, and then there's the GM sidebar, which we particularly liked because it's about, here's the paragraph or here's the chapter on, let's say, for example, trade and transport within the shipping industry. We worked out a whole bunch of maths, and I have many fond memories of Game Master's Vault sitting there trying to work out if you sold 4 chickens, 2 donkeys, 1 horse, and 2 cows, and you transported them over a distance of 40 miles at sea, would you as the farmer make any money? My math said that yes, you would. You'd make like 28 gold off of that sale. Game Master's Vault sat there, and now we're basing all of this based on the PHB in terms of its mechanics and its marketing and money values. Game Master's Vault sat there and he did the maths, again, and he's like, no, hang on a moment, we're not taking into account crew costs, we're not, and he worked out that it certainly would not be profitable whatsoever. So it's like, well, you see, that's why you've got all this magic and we're still stuck in a medieval kind of setting. So yes, all the costs, we've worked out all the costs. How much does a crew cost? Why the Kickstarter? Well, this is the layout of the book. We want to hire professionals to come in and do this. And the artwork. We want the artwork to be professional. So we've spoken to people who are concept artists for EA games, who are just super talented people. They've given us amazing prices. But when you look at it, if we want an artwork per ship, that's a basic 29 pieces of art. And if you've ever commissioned art, you'll know how expensive it is. So then in terms of timelines, how long would it take? Kickstarter finishes at the end of October. So by January, the book would be finished because the writing is done. And that's the bulk of it. Now we would just get all of the artwork in. Some of the layout stuff that's really coming through, I think it looks like a really good design, good layout. Type of thing. And then a stretch goal is the first one that we're revealing. These ones I particularly enjoyed. Something that we've added to ship combat within 5th edition is we've added in new abilities for the ship. There are orders that the PCs can give, and I think the important thing to bear in mind is that these orders, the PCs don't necessarily have to enact, the crew enacts. So the PCs give the order and then they're still free to act. So there's not a lockdown during ship combat. So there is an example of the cards that we want to produce. So there are over 40 actions which can now be issued. When we were playtesting this extensively, the players were sitting there with all these 40 commands, and they were trying to work out, oh, should I give this command or that command or this command or that, etc., etc., etc. Like spells, when you sit there with hundreds of spells, you kind of sometimes get a little bit overexposed. So here we've worked it out. We broke it down into 4 different sections. You've got attack, you've got buffing, attack, buffing, movement, and then repair. Lots of different things going on there. So we've designed these cards really visually simple so that you can find them easily. They're a printable PDF, so you can grab those as well. World Anvil and Dungeon Fog, again, joining me. I've joined them so many times. They've now joined me. All of the ships templates will be available on World Anvil, so you can track your ships. The templates will, of course, be available on our website for download as well. Dungeon Fog will be providing with us with all of the maps for the ships, so you're going to just get a whole bunch of extras based on the World Anvil and Dungeon Fog involvement. So, and we've got a new partner who joined us quite literally a few hours ago, and I'm going to talk about that because it's a giveaway competition in today's show. So I'm going to launch this now, and who knows, maybe it will succeed, maybe it won't. Here we go. There we are. I've read the terms. I've read the conditions. That's it. I was hoping for fireworks or something. Never done this before. So, yay, our project is now live. So now we will spread the word. And if that is what you can contribute to the project, I would be eternally grateful. Spreading the word, getting hold of this book. If you are running a game, then this book might be of use to you if you're running a ship-based game. Okay, so that is now launched. That was a big moment. For me, personally, I'm very nervous, very sentimental at this moment in time. Let me go back to the chat stream. I will share the link now to the Kickstarter. It was not available before, so now it is. Let me post up. Did it go to Twitter? I'm not sure. Let me send an email. Maybe that will have the link. Like I said, I've never done this before, so I'm not sure how one actually finds all these bits and pieces. I'll find it. I'll find it. I will find it one day. Maybe not today. You could probably just go look for it, possibly. Because it's just still giving me the preview. Anyway, I will find it. I will share it. And so there we go. If anyone else can find it and share the link, I would be suitably grateful. So there we are. Good question coming in. I just see this popping in. Thank you for the congratulations. I really do appreciate it. So Roger B, any chance of making it to Roll20 or you partner with Fantasy Grounds? I don't think that this system would work on Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds. What D&D did very, very cleverly, as far as I'm concerned, was they turned the ships into effectively into kind of like mounts. So the ships have got multiple hit points, multiple armor classes, and different regions that can be attacked and destroyed independent of its base hull. We then took that a step further and now said, okay, well, you even have thresholds for what happens when damage reaches a certain point on the hull. Does the ship start sinking? Does it not? So it becomes a very difficult thing to integrate easily, I would say, into something like a VTT, because it really is, it's kind of D&D, but it's kind of not too. We decided after lots of debate that it would be better to make a system that works rather than make a bad system that didn't work. So that's the approach that we took. Having said that, I have used these templates on Fantasy Grounds. There's a bit of a workaround that you go through, and I'm happy to share that. So there we go. There is the link shared up there by Adrian. And you know what? Adrian? Let me just make sure that I'm not denying somebody else who tried to share the link. Nope. So Adrian, you have just become the winner of today's giveaway. You've just become the winner. Well done. Congratulations. I didn't announce that I did say there was a giveaway, but I didn't say for what. So let's just double check. Can someone verify that this link works? Can someone verify that the link works? I'll be greatly appreciative if you do. And if it does work, Adrian, you've just won. And you haven't won XP, you've won something rather remarkable, which I will talk about in a little bit. Okay, now, there were some other questions coming through, which I do want to talk about based on this. We're not back to questions just yet in terms of other RPGs. We're still talking about the book at the moment. Let's see. Okay, so a good question, a very good question from Daniel Thorpe. What is the difference between this and Ghosts of Saltmarsh? Ghosts of Saltmarsh provides you with a foundation for ship-to-ship combat. They talk about the different types of hull. I think they have 10 or 12 ships. Maybe that's too many. They have several different types of ships. All of them are human ships. So you've got a sloop, you've got a galley, you've got a riverboat, you have... they've got quite a few human-based ships, which they kind of pulled from the medieval references and things. So they put that together. It's one of their chapters is on this ship combat, which they actually launched previously in another book. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the difference, but the rest of the book is on the adventures that happen around Saltmarsh, and then a huge section is devoted to aquatic adventures. So coming up with underwater caves, underwater encounters, there's random island generators, really, really good stuff in terms of creating an introduction to the aquatic world. What Nautical Campaigns does is it says, okay, it's great to dabble, but we want more. We want more information. We want more detail on ship combat specifically. So we said, right, we're going to have at least one ship for every major race. So there's a ship for the goblins, there's a ship for the orcs, there's a ship for the lizard folk, there's a ship for merfolk, there's a ship for Sahaugen, there's a ship for elves, for dwarves, for gnomes. We created ships for all of these different races, not just one either. We created multiple ships. We then also said, okay, well, how do we make those ships more interesting? What do we do in terms of magical settings? So we have aircraft carriers that carry giant eagles or pegasi or giant bats, or underwater ships, they carry sharks or seahorses and the like. And we had to work out rules for how those were going to work easily within the system. So a lot of what we did was we took what was presented in Ghosts of Saltmarsh from a ship-to-ship engagement, and we said, right, now how do we expand this out? So a lot of their concepts and things were fairly small scale. And we said, okay, well, how do you as a game master, as a dungeon master, how do you control 80 crew members in a combat? How do you work out inter-combat rules that will make sense? How do you make the crew feel as if they're part of the story rather than just as this background kind of thing? How do you manage that? How do you manage ship costs, ship running costs? That isn't something that's covered in Ghosts of Saltmarsh. That's something that we very specifically said, okay, let's work out these values. Let's work out water costs, food costs, medicine costs, storage costs. Let's work out those kinds of things so you don't have to when you're running this game. You should be able to take Nautical Campaigns and not have a question on how do I replenish crew? Can I go to town and just randomly, so we've got systems for that. Can you press gang people? Can you literally do what they did in the old days and abduct people and take them onto your ship? Yes, they can. And we worked out minutiae and skill checks and challenges and things to cover that. So it really is as much as we possibly could put into a book to handle life on a ship. So that's really what it's about. We have aquatic combat. We've worked out how to do underwater battles and things, and underwater to surface battles. So all of that's been put in there so that I think and I hope that when you're doing character creation, you're using PHP and you're using Ghosts of Saltmarsh. When you're doing your setting and you're creating underwater stuff, you're using Ghosts of Saltmarsh. But when you're wanting to run a game based on ships, you turn to Nautical Campaigns. So I hope that works. In terms of giving you an answer. Sudan asks, for your new book, do you cite sources of where you found the various pieces of historical information, please? I'm an academic and so always interested in the sources. Sudan, to be perfectly frank with you, there are no historical sources that we cited. We did debate long and hard about, the mast. How high is the mast? What sort of damage would you take from falling from the mast into the water versus onto the deck? The breadth and beam and width of the ship, how do those work together? So we did a lot of Googling, I will admit it, a lot of Googling going, okay, well, a brigantine, they had these kinds of sails, and this was roughly the speed that they could travel at versus this. But once you start journeying into the realm of fantasy, once you get into that space, things start to get a little bit muddy. You stop applying real world. And what happened was, when you look at medieval sailing ships from a European perspective, they weren't fantastic. They really, really, really weren't fantastic. The Roman galleys and triremes were still being used almost 2,000 years to the day that they'd been invented. So we looked at a lot of that. I went and read several books. There's a very interesting book, if you want to read about galleys, called The Life of a Protestant, or The Diary of a Protestant, which is about a French Protestant in 1637, 1670, somewhere around there, who was chained into a galley, because the French used to use galleys as prisons. Because I wanted to know what was life like aboard these things, to try and get that right. So a lot of that was based off of, okay, this is that, but we've got that spell, we've got that spell. So we didn't cite any historical references, because there weren't a lot of historical references that were applicable. Let me put it that way. Also, when you look at the ships that were included, they span several centuries worth of information. So yes, sadly, that's the long and short of it. Michael Derrimer asks, in the nautical book, do you focus on ship rules for sea, or is it translatable or transferable to other environments? I'm thinking airships. Right, so that was a big debate that we had. There was lots of fighting going on, but always constructive, always constructive. So what we were talking about was, should we talk about airship combat? Should we tackle three-dimensional air combat? We have squadrons. We have rules for if 6 or 10 Pegasi attack a ship from the air, how do you shoot them down? How much damage do they do? How do you keep track of them? How do you make it so that combat doesn't become a 10,000 die roll session every single round? And we eventually decided there is so much more scope that one can add in terms of aerial combat, or space combat for that matter, that we thought that can be an expansion, that can be something that is released later, or it can be something that you guys generate for yourself. So yes, you could use it for aerial combat, because we do have rules for firing from one medium into another, which could be useful. But generally speaking, what's the difference between an airship and a sailing ship? Three-dimensionality, primarily, is the difference. So yes, you could use it for other ships, I suppose. Okay, just rounding out these questions. Xander the Green says, could I get an autographed copy of the Nautical Campaign book? I don't mind paying a little extra. Xander, I would be happy to do that. And what we'll do is we'll run the Kickstarter. There is a section there where you can get a hard copy. We've managed to strike a very good deal with a publisher, blurb.com. They did our last book very successfully. They shipped them out for us. I can get them to ship it directly to me, and then I'll sign it and send a copy to you. Absolutely. And yes, there will be a slight surcharge, simply because it will ship to me and then I'll have to ship it to you. But we've been using Japan Post Office, and they have been amazing. Absolutely amazing. Can we use PayPal for the backing? Oh, that's a technical question I'm not sure about. I will have to get back to you. Okay, so the link, it works. Adrian, that means you are our winner. I will talk about that momentarily. So you have details. You do have details, because I know I personally gave you my card when I met you at Gen Con, very briefly, as we were both rushing on different ways. But yes, send me an email, please, as soon as you can. As in, like now, I need your name, your residential or your postal address, and a contact number, please, because our sponsor of the giveaway is waiting, quite literally waiting. All right. See, that's some questions there. I'm going to jump to that question. Tabletop Gaming for Kids says, how should I run a good beholder encounter? I want it to be challenging for my players. Beholders are always tricky. Don't underestimate the power of their lair. Now, I did a video where it was looking at beholders, as a matter of fact, in terms of think about something that floats in the air. What type of lair is it going to have? And the answer is a vertical one. Now, that automatically is going to give your player characters some kind of challenge. It's like, how do we get up there? How do we get down there? How do we fight on a ledge? The beholder's floating. It doesn't care. So I would look at it from that perspective. The actual physical, that's something that you can work out. But yes, definitely think of it in verticality rather than horizontality. James Tension says, what kind of art are you looking for? Do you have any place where I could send in art for it? I wouldn't mind helping out. James Tension, if you send an email to geekstable@gmail.com, we'd definitely love to have a look at your work. I will bring up the portfolio of the artist. He is a fan, as a matter of fact, of the show. That's how I found him. This is the kind of artwork that we're looking to raise money for. Let me just bounce there quickly. So this is some of the stuff that he does. It's beautifully atmospheric. I have to say, I'm an absolute love of his work. Really, really flavorful. This is Timothy Mathon. I absolutely adore his work. I think it's so cool. So yes, this is the kind of stuff, just like I said, so moody. I really enjoy it, and very, if I can say, sort of cinematic in a way, which is what we're looking for. So yes, the more we raise in Kickstarter, the more artwork we can have. We do have a very short turnaround. I absolutely admit that. So that is something that we will have to look at in terms of reaching out to other artists and things. But yes, so that's some of the work that Timothy's been doing. Really cool stuff, and I would love to include that. But if you do have your own portfolio, send it through geekstable@gmail.com. Michael Dremer, another question in the nautical book. Do you only focus on ship rules for sea? Oh, no, you already answered that one. Greg Smith, watching your channel for prep for my first D&D experience. Fantastic. Have character ideas, but GM wants us playing 2 each due to a lack of players. Is this abnormal, as it sounds like it might be messy? No, definitely not abnormal. There are occasions where GMs ask people to play 2 characters. I would be curious to ask the GM, do we have to? Can we not do it on less characters? I've run games for 1 player where it's literally just myself and that player, and for 2 players and so on. It also depends on the experience that your GM has, and if they are nervous, I have done videos on the YouTube channel that talk about playing games for smaller groups. Playing 2 characters, my immediate advice would be to try and make them as different as possible in attitude as well as in skills and power. So if the one is quiet and reserved, make the other one loud and gruff and grumpy. That would be my suggestion straight off the bat. For your first experience, you are under a lot of pressure. Bear that in mind. Another option might be to make one of them kind of quiet and maybe just writes notes down, whereas the other one becomes your main character, if that makes sense. Xander the Green asks, creative writing tonight? Yes, there is. And oh yes, we're doing a 2-hour show today because last week was insane. This week is the happy week, possibly pizza week. So yes, it's a 2-hour show. So we will be doing creative writing. That we will do on the we can do that on the hour if you like. More questions coming through. Did you pull much from the sources such as Battle System Fantasy Combat Supplement, Storm Rack, Stronghold Builder's Guide, Arms and Equipment Guide, Spelljammer, etc.? Asks IKSSBBWS09. Arms and Equipment Guide, yes. Stronghold Builder's Guidebook, no. Stormrack, there were some thoughts on Stormrack, not a lot though. Battle System Fantasy Combat Supplement, no. The one that I did draw quite heavily from was the Coda system. Star Trek Coda came out a long time ago, released by Decipher. I really liked their combat system. But you know, the biggest thing for me was when I got the Ghost of Saltmarsh book, they had done so much in terms of transferring player characters onto a ship and making it a faster experience. For us, when we were writing the book, we said, right, how fast can we make this so that we have cool combat rather than boring combat? And I hate to say it, but when I watched the Critical Role episode, quite a famous one where Matthew Mercer is running ship combat and for hours nothing happens and then suddenly the ship gets knocked over with tidal wave, I looked at that and I said, why did that not work? What failed? And it was because of one mechanic, one principal mechanic. So that's what started it all. We're saying, well, let's just erase that. And then if you look at my YouTube channel, I've run the Windswift adventures for years, where the crew effectively have an air sailing ship. And they've asked me all kinds of questions, operational costs. I've had to learn how to deal with big crew numbers or small crew numbers, ship-to-ship combat. And so all of that kind of got pulled together, drawn together, to create this system. So that's really where it came from. And then Game Master's Vault and his role players, wonderful guys, they got together. That we play tested this thing over several weeks. I think it was 5 or 6 weeks. We play tested, and as they asked questions got sent through. We answered, we adjusted, we added. We had other play testers whom I didn't get the experience of playing with. They took the system raw, they looked at it and they went, this could change, this could tweak. They helped in terms of speeding up combat even more, which is better. So there we go. Next question from Toldich Verwuster. Designing a storyteller RPG system. I haven't played storyteller, so bear that in mind. Trying to keep the tone gritty in terms of combat, though not the focus they do happen. Any suggestions for health systems that realize or release the drama? Let's talk about Coda. Let's talk about Coda for a little bit. The Coda system, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with it, but the Coda system, basically it didn't matter what power your character was, what level they were, all characters had a fixed health value. So humans could take this much damage. Klingons, because it's Star Trek, could take more. Vulcans could take more. So, but it wasn't a pool that grew and grew and grew. As a result, when you took damage, there was a significant amount of effect happening on your skills and your abilities. Now, when you look at 5th edition, they have exhaustion. It doesn't come up very often. Then you play this version, and exhaustion comes up almost all the time. It's very gritty. And when you see the review on this, you're going to hear a word used by myself and some of the other GMs where we say, it's dark, it's gritty. So I think, and this is the other thing, my worst role-playing experience was where I was invited to a table. The GM said, okay, we're going to randomly roll to see where you start. They rolled, I was on the side of a mountain, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to climb down to get to the valley. And I failed my climb check, and he said, well, you fall to the bottom of the cliff, you take this much damage. Oh, and by the way, you've broken your leg. So every time you try and move, you have to try and remain conscious. So you have to make a conscious check, whatever it was, constitution check. And I failed. So I passed out. And he's like, okay, I'm going to roll random encounter to see if something finds you. Oh, nothing finds you. For 3 hours, that's where I was because he was waiting for the rest of the party to come and find me. They didn't know where my character was because I was a drop into their group. So they had no real narrative reason to go anywhere near the mountain range. And after 3 hours, he rolled an encounter die. Oh, a pack of wolves have found you. They eat you. End of session. If combat is so real that player characters become so disadvantaged through it, you remove the heroism aspect. And that, unfortunately, is something you're going to have to take into consideration. So bear that in mind. Bear that in mind. Okay, so yes, you've sent me that email, I hope. What have you won? What have you won? Oh my goodness, there's so many questions. I'm so far behind. Okay, I'm skipping to the bottom. So if you have asked questions previously while I've been talking, please ask them again, because just not enough time. Okay, so what have you won? I reached out this morning. I should have actually been wearing it, actually. This beautiful pin, which I got at Gen Con, as a matter of fact, is from Campaign Coins. Now, Campaign Coins, I usually wear this on the show. You see it every now and again popping through. Campaign Coins is an Australian-based company, and they produce kind of, coins and badges and the like. And I really, really like what they do. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, I'm doing this thing and you've got some really cool stuff which kind of links with the thing that I want to do. So let's talk. This is their website, campaigncoins.com. And I said, this is what I really like. This is what you do. Let's talk. This was an email this morning. And they said, oh, well, how about this cool thing from Devon Rue? It's a compass, which is pretty damn spectacular, if you ask me. Designed by Devon Rue, the famous map maker. So they said, right, they will sponsor one for today's show as a giveaway. And then we will add these as part of the stretch goals and pledge manager for the book sale itself. So you can get one of these really cool compasses to add on to your map to keep track of north, west, east and south, so that you know where you're going or in which way the wind is blowing. So that's what you've won yourself, Adrienne. As soon as you send it through to me, I will send your details on to them and they will post this wonderful, wonderful coin off to you. Now, they really are nice and robust, which I like. Don't know if you can hear that, but nice metal productions there. So look out for that in the post as soon as you send me the email. Okay, let's go back to questions, because enough of that now. As we continue forward, if I press this button, does it do that? It does. Okay, fantastic. Sorry, I've just been sidetracked. We've already got backers coming through for this book. I'm amazed. That must be you guys. I'm blown away already. I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. Let's just go there. Let's just go there. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And you've got a month, so yes, if you want to join, that's absolutely awesome. So there we go. Right, more questions. Where are we now? Okay, so Scorchclaw says, no, wait. Sorry, I'll get there. Darth Stuticus. Do you find the example you just gave more annoying, or the fact that you could die in character generation in early Traveller? Okay, so Traveller system, I haven't played it. I've read it. I've got the system. I haven't actually read it yet. And Traveller, your character can die in character creation. I don't have a problem with that, because going into the game that there is a potential for death in character creation. Whereas this particular game that we were playing, I was expecting to play. I was expecting to play a character in a game and run that game. And yes, there was a potential for death in glorious combat. But the fact that the DM decided to allow random chance to determine where my character started, and then there was no plot armor, absolutely fine, but that also wasn't explained. That wasn't given as an option. So I think for me, the irritation was sitting there for 3 hours, and then would it have really hurt the GM to say that encounter was a peasant coming to get firewood, and that they took me back to their hut to recuperate so my character could join in? It really wouldn't have hurt them, and as a matter of fact would have then fulfilled the contract, the social contract between, well, come and play in my game, I'm here to play, no you can't play, you're dead. So yes, I completely agree. There are systems where you can die without a doubt. but you know that going in, and I think that's important. So there we are. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for sending the email. After today's show, I will address it and take it from there. Next question is from Scorchclaw. I've decided to cut out some content from my campaign because it seems to have pretty much run its course. How do you suggest I mitigate the players noticing, feeling the small gap? It depends on what you're cutting out, so I think that's a bit tricky. I think the next answer I can give you is cut it out for a reason. So don't just drop it straight away. So let's say, for example, and it's difficult not knowing the exact context of it, but we don't have the capacity to do that. So think about it in terms of let's say your idea is that the Duke is creating a horde of undead to take over the kingdom, and then you decide that actually the players have done enough, the Duke is not going to do that anymore, but they've got all these clues about weird undead being seen and something like that. Cut the Duke's story out completely, absolutely, but then drop in a crazy necromancer in the graveyard that they can then fight, and then they resolve it. So it feels as if it was just a random side quest. Meanwhile, you've closed it out and done that sort of thing. So that's something that's a quick answer, I suppose. Mark Anthony Smith says, I want to introduce an Oni, the Ogre Mage, as an antagonist. I want it to appear several times in disguise before the PCs have an encounter with it. How could I do this and subtly drop hints? I would say that it depends on the ogres in your world. Sorry, let me have a sip of this elixir of coffee. I would say it depends on the ogres in your world. I would also try to decide on when the players are going to meet the rest of the ogres. So, if the ogres, let's say, for example, have a distinct odor, or perhaps they live in a specific area where there's a certain color of mud that's unique to that area, you could have the players meet the creature. It's disguised, but there's a strange aroma, or they notice that the footprints the person leaves behind are a certain type of white clay. It's a dismissible description that your players will go, what? And it won't make any sense to them, which is absolutely fine, but it will let them know that there's something strange. The next encounter, most likely, should be one where this individual helps the party. That allays any kind of fears that this person is going to betray them. They go, well, okay, it can't be that bad because he's helping us, or she's helping us, or they're helping us. However the situation is going to play itself out. Again, though, reinforce the strange smell, or the weird coloration, or the slight speech. Could be a speech impediment. The ogre is used to speaking with its tusks sticking out of the front of its mouth, so even when it's disguised as a little old woman, it still speaks with its jaw all the way forward. Whatever. I mean, you figure out what makes them unique. So that then when they do discover the ogres, they start to, hang on, those ogres have got the same smell as that person that we kept meeting. And then when they discover that, they go, connect all the dots. Connect all the dots. So that would be a quick answer. Next question, Dylan Lowe says, can I please have the stats for Flick? He will be an NPC in my game. I have those somewhere. I think you can actually find them. Hang on a moment. Can't you? Can you? Can't you? Are they there? If you head on over to World Anvil, I'm just going to check now. World Anvil. Let me go there. Adamel, who looks after our World Anvil page. Sorry, I keep leaning over because my webcam sits right on the edge of my screen and obscures everything that's of value. No, wait, I'm in the wrong world. Let's go back. Oh, I can't see. There we go. And we want to switch over to Ghost of Saltmarsh. It's somewhere in here, I'm sure of it. Characters, if they're linked, it should be there. They're not linked there. They're definitely there. I will find them and I will share them with you. because they were made freely available. So don't worry. Don't worry. Lord of Duke, thank you for that. I'm glad that you... well, I hope the book is helpful in terms of constructing your world. I really do appreciate that. So thank you. Next question is Hannah May Create. One of my players is notoriously unlucky. Oh, they are. He would like to make this an aspect of future character creation. How would you approach something like this without putting the onus on the DM? I have had friends who are incredibly unlucky. With cards, principally. Magic the Gathering. Oh, that old game. New game, if you're new to it. When we used to play Magic the Gathering, this was in 1997, when we used to play Magic, it did not matter who built his deck, who shuffled his deck. He would take his deck, and the moment his fingers touched those cards, with or without gloves, we tried, all of the mana, all of the life energy, all of the magic energy would immediately clump together and be at the bottom. Instantaneously. So he would sit there with a handful of nothing. It was uncanny. To the point that it was like, well, you actually just, you can't play. Unless you sit next to someone and they handle your cards. And even then, it was so weird. So what do you do with people who are unlucky and constantly roll poorly? Again, Game Master's Vault, I don't know if he's still in the chat, but there is a player who, when he plays at GMV's house, doesn't roll above a 10 on a D20. How do you handle that? He was a very good sport about it, and he enjoyed it, and he started to basically make it his thing. In terms of handling that, something that you can look at, and again, it's entirely up to your player base as well, is to get them to write down the numbers 1 through 20 if you're using a D20 system, and then basically they get to work through those numbers as they so choose. It is an unwise player who will use the top 10 numbers instantaneously. It does take away a huge amount of chance, but at the same time it removes that weird thing about them always being unlucky. Might work. Their hero pages are still up. I didn't actually look at the hero pages. That's where I should have gone. So if you want to find those hero pages, Grizzles, go and have a look. It would be welcome. Skill Scrapers says, I'd like to run a second campaign in my world, running simultaneous with my current party, so that they can meet, and it's a cool surprise. Is this possible to achieve smoothly? Any advice? A second campaign in my world running simultaneous with my current party so they can meet. Okay, so I have run a campaign in my Braxia setting where I had 3 groups, 3 separate player groups running around on 3 separate campaigns. They were not, one was actually actively working against the other, although they weren't aware of that at that particular time. The best thing to do would be to link the adventures if you need to, but keep track on your map. Now, I'm going to say this because it is a new feature which if I had, I would have been super cool about it. World Anvil, load your map in there, and then you can put the pins where your characters are, and you can move them around during sessions and things. More importantly, they leave trails as to where they've been, which is very useful if you want to be ultra sneaky about stuff and have it when their trails cross, be able to talk to that particular group saying, oh, you come across signs of carnage or this or that. Bottom line is the campaigns can be separate. They should be separate unless you want to have some really cool sessions where everyone gathers around the table and it's like, so I've brought you all here today because you've all arrived at the same temple at the same time. It does require some finessing if you want to plan that, and let me tell you, it was the most amazingly terrifying experience for the players because they'd been hunting each other, and I made sure that it didn't turn into PvP. I had to add in a few little delaying adventures for the one group so that they didn't get to the final temple at the same ahead of the other group, so that they quite literally, the cliffhanger for both groups was you see the temple in the distance. End episode or end session. Next week we come together. And then I got everybody to come together. It was really, really, really cool. I think the bottom line is making sure that you keep track of where they are, and if they do things, let them have an effect. My one group killed the god of color, and so the world lost all of its color. The second group, they sat down, I said, right, life is great, but it's all in black and white. And they said, what happened to the color? We said, I don't know. It just, you woke up this morning and there's no color. You remember it being here yesterday. Today there's nothing. They chose not to pursue that. They went, oh, okay, that's weird, but that's fine. I'm sure, fine. And then they carried on their mission. You do run the risk that if there are these world-changing events, they're going to start investigating. That could be equally as interesting. So something to bear in mind. Next question. Oh wait, we got to do creative writing. We're going to do that in 1 minute. We're going to do that in 1 minute. So just one more question. Let's see. Oh, there's discussions going on. I will not interrupt those discussions. In the meantime, whilst you guys are working through that, I love it when there's discussions and things going on and people are talking. I wish there was a platform that aside from seeing it behind me, where Twitch and YouTube could combine. So something that we are thinking about doing, by the way, is moving the stream, not moving it, it will still be on Twitch and on YouTube, but it would be broadcast on our website. And that might, if I can convince the Web Goblin, allow us to have a unified chat on the website rather than split. Because I think that could be quite fun. Ryan Kim asks, do you have some unique ideas for minor quests characters could go on in a campaign, such as collect a rock ochre, I hate that name, a rock ochre feathers to create a set of wings? Well, that's a pretty good minor quest to go on. I think also something to bear in mind when you're coming up with minor quests and things is it could be quite anything. It could just be a spark of, what do I feel like? Oh, last night, what did I watch? Oh, I watched Dark Crystal last night. Okay, so what if there was this crystal in a cave that was causing the creatures to go mad? Oh, that's super cool. Let's do that. So then you can then do that. And that can inspire you. One of the things I do live by is the 4 different types of quests. Thwarting, quests that are about overcoming a creature, an activity, or an action. Delivering, where the characters have to deliver something and have difficulty delivering it. Collecting something, where the characters have to get to somewhere, break in, collect something, and then get it back. Slightly different from delivering. And then, of course, finally is discovering, where they go off to learn something new. With those 4 in mind, I cycle through them as my players make up weird and wonderful things. If any of you watched Descent into Avernus this week, if you haven't, this is not a spoiler, I suppose. What I had planned for the characters to do, they went in the complete opposite direction. I did not anticipate. It was my mistake. I did not anticipate what they were going to do. And so as a result, I had to, on the fly, try and figure out how to make what they were doing interesting. I'm lucky. I only had to wing it for 2 hours. Sometimes you have a session that runs for 4 hours. So what do? You default down to something. So the quest that they're currently on is effectively a collection quest. That's the broadest stroke. They have to go and collect a war machine, but they're having a lot of difficulty en route getting there. So yes, once you've figured out your type, it's a lot easier, I think, to then create adventures on the fly or quests that kind of fit there. So there we are. Madamayo says, my players just took over a cult that has a goal of trying to end the world. Should apocalypse level events be in player control? Yes, they should be. Absolutely they should be. Without the shadow of a doubt they should be. There should also be a severe repercussion for characters joining a world-destroying cult. Excuse me. Oh, my throat. I have no idea what's wrong. I'm not sick. It's just... Anyway. The players join this cult that wants to destroy the world. I am sure that there are secret organizations from various kingdoms that have been watching this cult. They will report back to their king or their leader, there is new leadership, and they are continuing to try and destroy the world. Okay, send all of the heroes after those individuals. It's still them trying to destroy the world, but now they have got this challenge of surviving long enough to do that. That's the important thing. Ame Musashi says, do your players ever do what is expected? No, they don't. That's why I love them so much. I think one should always expect your players to come up with something that you haven't thought about. You can guide them to a large degree. Who knew that they would run in, oh, well, our first order is the one that we're going to follow and not the second order, and I thought that was very funny. And then I tried to contain them. With a giant army, and they went, nah, we're going to run into that army anyway. I was like, okay, let's do that. That isn't exactly what happened in the show, so there we are. It's a thing. Right, now, next question. I'm looking for questions. No, creative writing. How could I forget about creative writing? Good grief. Okay, so creative writing today. If you have not been part of the show before, and I see that we've got a lot of new faces coming in, so hold your questions for now. Creative writing. Okay, if you have not been part of the show before, creative writing is the moment where you get to perhaps stretch your creative imagination for a little bit, stepping outside of the normal comfort zones that you might find yourselves in. We try to improve our narrative capabilities through a creative writing process. One of the things that is incredibly challenging and is often contradictory, you'll often hear people saying, oh, you must write what you know. Write what you know. That's what you'll do. And you go, but I don't know what it's like to be a soldier in the World War I trench. I don't know what it's like to do this or to do that. How do we do that? Well, I pondered that question long and hard as I was going through script writing and writing courses, listening, and for me what made sense is you not writing about what you know in terms of worldly knowledge. You're writing about what you know emotionally. So to that end, although today is a very positive day and we've been talking about pizza, which I think now is absolutely definitely on the cards, but yes, the question would be, or your creative writing challenge is, I want you, and this might be difficult, I want you to describe in a very short sentence, you put it into chat, in a very short sentence, the most afraid you have ever been. What action, what thing happened where you were the most afraid over a period of time? I will give you an example. For me, the moment I was most afraid so far in my life, I've had multiple events, but the one that I have to talk about, or I have to say the most, would be back in South Africa. I had my house. I had just bought my house. This is a structure that has a gigantic metal gate, solid, robust metal gate in front of the wooden front door, which has got 3 locks on it. In front of that metal gate is about a meter of grass and pathway, whereby then there is a 3 meter, 9 foot high concrete wall with another meter on top of metal spikes. Inset into that wall is a solid metal sheet covered gate with a deadbolt on it, with a lock on that deadbolt. So we're talking a pretty solidly defendable position. And one night I woke up hearing this sound of my gate banging. It was quite a distinct metal sound. And immediately woke up, instantly thought, this is it, that we're under attack. The house alarm, because there was also an alarm inside the house, laser sensors and stuff, had not gone off yet. So that meant that they weren't yet inside. So I went to the window and very carefully looked out of the curtains, because the last thing you want to do is to make contact with a burglar in South Africa. Anyway, I don't know about the rest of the world, because then they will have a firearm pointed at you and then you are very in a very bad place. Looked out the window and all I could see were fingers reaching through my gate outside, fiddling with the lock. and immediately pulled back. And I thought, this is pretty brazen, even though it was sort of 1 a.m. So ran back to my room, typed in to WhatsApp into the street group that we had. Someone's trying to break into my house. Please send help. I hadn't called the security company at that stage because my brain was in absolute panic mode. And then I heard my vehicle gate going, which is now double metal gates, busy rattling. And I thought, this is not just one person, this is multiple people. So I started to walk back to the window, but my legs at this stage were shaking because, having done a lot of videos on how to survive house break-ins and things, it was terrifying. As I get to the window, I look through the window, and there is a head with a sort of a helmet on, looking over the gate, having climbed up as high as they could whilst this thing was shaking. I was beside myself. My text messages were, these are the end times, zombie apocalypse is now over. And then I couldn't move. Something locked me in place. I could not do it. And for at least, it felt like an eternity, but for at least 5 seconds, I was immobile. Now, in my head, I had had dreams and nightmares before where I grab the sword on the wall and I bang it on my shield and I charge these individuals. That was not the case. I was frozen quite solidly in place. My housemate at the time came wandering out saying, what's going on? And I couldn't answer. I just stared out the window at this hand on the lock. And then the hand knocked on the door, and my WhatsApp started going off, so that sort of broke me out of this panic. And the electricity had gone off. I should have anticipated this. The electricity for the entire street had blacked out. And as a result, my internal house alarm, a silent alarm, had gone off, and the people trying to get through the gate were the security company to come and try and save me from whatever disaster had befallen my house because our power had gone out. That was terrifying. That was absolutely terrifying. And I remember afterwards sitting there drinking down cups of tea with sugar going, I completely failed as a defender of my house, as a defender of my property. It was, and for me, that was so sad, as a personal realization, and that fear, that stomach dropping fear, that was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And so when I try and write about characters failing to do something, I draw back to that moment. And I think about that moment and I go, how did I feel afterwards? I felt stupid. I felt so bad about not being the hero I had wanted to be. And yes, I added more locks to the door because I was like, well, I'm not the hero. I'm not going to grab a sword off the wall. And believe you me, I had swords and weaponry in the house. No firearms, but definitely a lot of medieval weaponry. It just didn't make sense. So I go back to that. And I draw on that when I want to create people who fail at doing something that they believe they should have been able to do, or that fear. So yes, anyway, that's for me. It's something that I find unique. Well, not unique, but definitely something that I think sets people apart. If you grow up in a country that's fairly violent, and South Africa is, you don't sleep very lightly. Here in Japan, everyone sleeps like the dead, and can't understand why I wake up when I hear a door banging in the middle of the night. They're like, someone probably forgot to lock it. I'm like, no, it's the end. It's all over. Anyway, so it's quite amusing. I hope people are sharing. Let's see, we've got some things here. The one event that scared me the most was driving home after work. I noticed the same 2 headlights following me. I purposely took an alternative route, and they still followed. I was so scared driving to my parents' house and lay on the horn while I drove down the gravel drive. However, to put a comic spin on my tale, my dad, hearing the blaring car horn, walked out as I was pulling into the garage in his white boxer shorts and a shotgun. There we go. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely amazing story. I'll never forget watching my grandfather being hijacked in our driveway. It wasn't fear because I didn't know to be afraid. I was just seeing him scuffling around with these individuals before they drove off with his car. There was a man who I wish I could have emulated. Here was a 68-year-old man. As he pulls into his driveway, 4 young men in the prime of their life rush up to his window. One of them has a firearm pointed at his face, says, "Get out of the car." He gets out of the car, and they say, give us the car keys. And you're trained that you should give the car keys over. You shouldn't fight back. It's not worth it. A car is not worth your life. But this old man, having done his due diligence in terms of serving for his country and the like, threw the keys into the road because he said, "I'm not giving you the bloody keys," and swung at the guy. Eventually, the 4 of them had to overpower him, hit him on the head with the butt of the revolver, or the pistol, or whatever it was, which we were very grateful for, rather than just shooting him dead, and drove off with the car. And I was standing in the driveway watching all of this going on, and as they drove off, he got up and he said, "Well, they've just stolen the bloody car." And it was an interesting experience, to say the least. The joke was on them, however. The vehicle was over 20 years old, and the petrol gauge, the gas gauge, didn't work, so it always showed empty. So they abandoned the car about 200 meters down the road because they were afraid that they wouldn't get out of town before the security forces responded. Anyway, so yes, there's some talk of PTSD. Absolutely. Look, I don't ever advocate that you should draw on things that are going to cause you personal issues and anxiety by reliving. I don't advocate that at all, unless it's some kind of way of working through things. But drawing on experiences that have helped shape you and change you, I think, is definitely something that is of value from a creative process. Another random choice here. I was most afraid when I moved from Arizona to Arizona from Canada when I was 14. And walking into school that first day and not knowing a single face. Who hasn't been there, Dylan Lowe? Absolutely. That first day, that first moment where you walk in and you're going, "Oh my goodness, what do I do? How do I do this?" I have to say that one of the major benefits that I have derived from the YouTube channel, and this is something that you cannot quantify, is that I have had to put up with people criticizing every aspect of my being in a public forum. And I took the advice of some very good friends of mine, which was just to stop caring. So the other day we went to this fancy party thing at Gen Con, and this was a completely new experience for all of us. These were people we didn't know. This was this kind of situation, and under normal circumstances, terrifying. And immediately what happened was people started to clump together based on who they knew. I think I'm old enough now, and because of YouTube, I maybe am too brazen about it. I just walked up to people and said, "Oh, hello, my name is Guy. What are you doing here? How do you know the host?" Who is the host, by the way? Because I got invited by somebody else, and they're not here yet, so let's start talking. But yes, that first day at school, that first moment, that terrifying moment, definitely happens. Catherine Bischoff says, "My most terrifying moment was hiking around a curve on a trail and meeting a male bear." Oh, wildlife encounters. You do not appreciate the power of a natural animal until it's just you and it is not armed with a rifle, and neither are you. It's armed with what it has. Oh yes. It's that sort of moment of, this is how I die. That's disappointing. I was hoping to die buried in an avalanche of books. But bear is not bad. At least it'll make the news, I suppose. Well, in my head it would have just been, oh. Sunflamer, "I spent the most of my night in Port Authority waiting for a bus and chatting to random people. It's funny how jumpy people get at the mention of the word terrorism." Yes, I would be very nervous about using that word in any kind of authoritative space, I must admit. Sleep paralysis and sleep apnea. Yes, yes. Absolutely terrifying. I have many friends who suffer from sleep apnea, where the airway gets blocked, so the person has to wake up. They don't fully wake up, they just keep going. Yes, yes, yes. Just horrific. So yes, it's horrid when our bodies don't do what our minds want them to do. And I think that is something when we look at role-playing, we forget, I think, that NPCs should be reacting in an appropriate way. So when the party charges towards them, phasers drawn or axes at the ready, I think a lot of NPCs are just going to be going, oh, this is how I die. I was hoping to be buried in a pile of books, but apparently it's by axe. And it won't make the news, because that doesn't exist in this world. Damn, so many regrets upon death. I think it's always good as well to express these things and to be aware that when you are stuck, when you reach a point in your creativity where you go, oh, I don't know what to do next. I really don't know what to do next. Sometimes just think about, think of a bad situation, or think of a happy situation, or an amazing situation, or something that just makes you smile and go, well, that I did not expect. Like the other day, it was my birthday, and a friend of mine here in Japan baked me a cake. Now, this might not sound like the most amazing thing on planet Earth until you realize that the average Japanese home doesn't have an oven. They have these really small little frying things for baking fish, which are flat, or maybe a little oven, but baking is not a big thing here. So to bake a cake, you go, how did you bake that? You have a gas cooker and a hot plate. It was made inside the rice cooker, which almost every home has here in Japan. And they had been very conniving to find out what my favorite foods were. And so I had this banana and chocolate cake made for me in a rice cooker. Now, that for me showed far more. I mean, the cake was delicious to begin with because it was cake. I mean, but it was super cool. So it was just a little touch. It was like, well, that's just fantastic. I like that. So that's a little moment that you can draw from in your own experience. How did you feel? How did you react? What was, and I'm still talking about it to this day. I mean, three days later. So, yes. Anyway, all right. So that is creative writing for today. Next time you get stuck, boom. Think about something that made you terrified, think about something that made you happy, and then apply it to the situation, or figure out how that situation could occur to the characters so that you can instill those things within them. So there you are. There you are. Have a look at that. Let's go back to questions now. We've got 20 minutes or so before the end of the show. So let's go and have a look at that. Ask your questions. If you have questions about role-playing, now is the time to ask them. And I will try and answer them as best I can. Let's see. We don't have anything there. I'm just checking. Okay, cool. So back to Restream. No more questions. Everyone's gone quiet. We were talking about the cake. The cake was delicious. It's cake. Of course it was. Now, there are some bad cake. There's some hard cake that you can get out there. Zaki, you're just lucky. I saw your question there. Please remember to put the word question in front of it. No, now it's gone. Oh, there it is. Could you give advice in terms of a new character I have brewing at the moment? I have a tiefling bard cooking up, and he has multiple personalities. I have no real idea how to roleplay this, so should I advise my DM or try to rise to the challenge? Did your DM assign you the tiefling with multiple personalities, or did you come up with it? If you came up with it, you should talk to your DM and your fellow players before you continue, because they might not be comfortable with that. Or it might be a case of, is it going to be fun, or is it going to be annoying? Which personality are we dealing with today? This could be an issue. I could see it working for one adventure, maybe two, but after a while it might become a little bit boring to play. I hate to say it, but it might become a little bit boring to play. Draken asks, will you be doing any special campaigns, multi-week or one-shot for Halloween or for Christmas? Hasn't been asked of the channel, to be honest with you. We will be deciding what adventures I create for the Patreons this month, I should say. Web Goblin will be sending out September's adventure, which is a sci-fi fighters and bombers temporal rift challenge thing, which I think is a lot of fun. So yes, there were some suggestions. We have a channel on our Discord server. That's discord.gg/greatgm. And there is a channel there where you can suggest what you would like in terms of modules and things. October being Halloween, we certainly could. 2 years ago, last year, how many years have I been in Japan? Last year we released a Christmas special called on the 12th night, which was a bunch of goblins. That's free to download from our website, www.greatgamemaster.com. You can download that there. That's sort of a Christmassy themed one. I can't say that people jumped up and down for joy with them or not, but yes, if it's something that you could, if it's something that you want, if that's a thing, jump into the Discord. I have no idea what's going on with my throat. I'm so sorry. You could jump into the Discord or on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you want to engage with the channel, and definitely propose it. That's without a doubt something that you can do. I see that there is a failure to find Flick stats. Give me a second, dear viewers, as I delve into the realm of things. Let us see this Flick stats. He wasn't very high level because I forgot to level them up during the show. That much I do know. Supplement. Kickstarter people. It's under people? Could be under people. You know, when you have folder upon folder upon folder and you try to name them correctly when you first start, you're all enthusiastic. And then panic happens, you forget to put something in the right folder, and the next minute it's all in the wrong folder, and things just go south from there. That's what I'm currently looking at. I thought it was under people. It's not under people. Could it be under... there? No? It would have been under the overlays. Okay, give me a second. Give me a second. We're getting there. We're getting there. Awfully slowly, but we are getting there. Nope, not a new folder either. Nope, 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 nope. Wow. Okay. I have them. Definitely have them. I don't know where. I will have to go looking for them, and if you remind me in Discord to post them up, I will put them into Discord for you, so that you can look at them at your leisure. But a little bit worried that they're not in that folder, actually. Oh, wait a minute. They might just be in the root folder. Yes, they are. Ha 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 ha. Okay, so I'm going to do this. This is the character sheet that you are talking about. This is the character sheet. So, yeah, not a huge amount of amazing values. This was the character Seabold, which is the unique race which is in the book, Nautical Campaigns. Yes, not a lot of hit points, some nice initiative. He had a good swimming speed of 40 feet per round, dark vision of 60 feet per round. Nice little build. I have to say that Kaora, when he played him, I was often surprised that he was a wizard. I frequently thought that he was more of a rogue than anything else, but each to their own. That's what makes the game that much more entertaining. So yes, remind me in Discord and I'll drop them in the Discord for you. Next question, Wolvie Zandalari says, I have a person in my group who is getting upset about not being able to make a backstory. I tried giving advice, but it's not landing. As the DM, I'm finding it hard to give them the spotlight. Are they upset that they are not able to make a backstory because they can't decide on a backstory? Is it because they feel that they're not creative enough? Do they not want a backstory? Just unpack that for me a little bit. I think that when someone is struggling, ask them to verbally talk it through. So sit down with them and say, all right, your character, parents, still alive. Go back to those videos. I had a video on the, I think it was 8 questions to ask to create a good character. And it's all about the parents. Are the parents alive? Where are the parents from? What did the parents teach them? Why did they leave their parents? What do their parents think about religion? Those kinds of things. So use that to... What it does is, if you make it a series of questions that you are asking the player doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of pressure to come up with anything creative. They're answering fairly mundane questions, usually. Okay. Sumeragi-chan? I don't know. I have this player who never seems to get interested in the games when I run for my group. I've tried different things, both tactile and not to involve them, but it doesn't seem to work. If they're disruptive of your group and you have asked the rest of your group whether they feel the same way, have you asked the person? Have you said, listen, you don't seem to engage. You don't seem to be interested. I've had players like that before. I go back to South Africa for 2 weeks in November for the Web Goblin's wedding, which is super exciting. But yeah, it's I had players back in SA where you would ask them if they wanted to be engaged or not, and they'd say, no, I just love the story. So I'll roll dice and stuff, but I like to see what everybody else is doing. That's fine if you don't have anybody else who wants to join your table. But after a while, you have to realize that that is a person sitting at the table, taking up time during the game, and quite possibly could be swapped out for someone who's more active and who makes the game better. It's a tough decision, and I know it sounds awfully selfish, but at the same time, it's like, well, you need to be as entertained as they are. It's not fair that they let you entertain them. They need to give you something back. Reciprocity. There's that social contract we were talking about a little bit earlier. So bear that in mind. Xander the Green, what to do when another player's strong personal beliefs or ideals try to dictate how everyone else's play style? Ooh, it can be tough. I always say a firm response from the Dungeon Master. That is how you play it. That is not necessarily how so-and-so needs to play it. So-and-so, how would you like to play it? Take control, take command. It can be difficult, and especially if the person fights back and says, no, but this is the right way to do it. Are you the game master? No, you are not. Sit back, enjoy the game. If you don't like how we run the game, there are other games you can go and join. RPGTablefinder.com will help you find another group of people who play it the way you do. Bearing in mind, I hope this comes across on the channel, there is no wrong way to play our wonderful, wonderful tabletop role-playing games. There is only the wrong group. So you as a player, you might want to be a murder hobo rules lawyer who absolutely is a simulationist at heart. I can't think of a worse combination, personally. There are other murder hobo rules lawyer simulationists out there who are just craving for another player to join and to be part of that table. Dylan Lowe, thank you for that. Really do appreciate that. So always remember that it might seem selfish to try and expel someone from a group because they don't fit, but all you're doing is creating an opportunity for them to find another group where they do fit, and for you to find a player who fits your table. So there we are. Wolvie, I see your response there that you've tried it, but it's all dead ends. Do they just not answer? Do they just say, oh, I don't know? Oh, I don't know. In which case, I would then do the next tactic, which kind of works for relationships as well, is to say, right, are your parents A, alive, B, dead? Choose one, or roll a dice. So break it down into yes or no answers. And slowly you can build a story on their behalf, going yes, no, no, yes. So remove any sense of creativity whatsoever from them and apply it as you build the story slowly. So I would suggest you do that. I would suggest you go that route. But yes, it definitely sounds difficult. Flick will live on, says Dylan Lowe. Oh, I'm sure Carol will be happy to hear that. Ame Masashi says, working on an escort mission where the party is leading a powerful hag towards a prison in secret to prevent her followers from trying to break her free. The problem is I don't know how to make it interesting other than her trying to lure them for a chance to escape. How would you handle it? What do we expect from a prison transport? What do we expect from a prison transport? Boom. We expect an attempt at a break. That's what we expect. So what don't we expect? Turn it on its head. What if the hag, as she is busy going along, she turns to the group and she says, if you see anyone with red bandanas, you must know they are trying to kill me. I don't think your lords will be too happy if I arrive dead. So, turn it on its head. Make the party have to protect the hag from various groups trying to kill her, until, of course, you turn it around where someone is then trying to rescue her. I would also try and make sure that you ensure that the geography that they're moving through is equally as treacherous. So perhaps it's a very narrow gully that they have to squeeze through on this particular road, or it's a tree that's fallen over and obviously they have to go around it, but there's a river or there's a bridge or things along those lines. I would really make sure that you punctuate it, so you go, all right, so the first one will be an encounter, but it's going to be a different encounter. It's going to be people trying to kill the hag because they don't feel that she should actually be arrested. They feel that she should be destroyed completely. So they have to protect her from it. Then the next one could be a geography-based problem. There's a river and there's a boat, but the boat only fits 2 people. So 2 people are going to have to go in this boat to save the hag. That's tricky. And then the third one could be where the hag's rescuers then try and rescue the hag. So it's chopping and changing it up. Do we have to protect you from them, or do we have to kill them before they get to you? I would also try and put some kind of time pressure on it as well. If the moon sets before they arrive, she gets her powers back, something like that. I would add that in. Samaragi-chan. I'm going to go with Samaragi-chan. Take on players who let gameplay build more on character background from simple bases. Say, character was left on a church's doorstep, taken in and raised by paladins, became cleric. What is your take on players who let gameplay build more on character background? So there is definitely an alternative in terms of character backstory, where the character's backstory is evolved and developed over time. I always find this happening in my games. My players might give me 12 pages worth of character backstory, and I look at it and I go, yes, that's interesting, that's interesting. I'm going to pull that piece out, I'm going to pull that piece out. I have no idea what's going on. I recently had a player who said to me that it felt like I was being very distant in terms of responding to their character backstories, because they were writing large amounts of backstory. And I said, well, I'm reading it and you've written it, and it's great that you've got all of this stuff in there, but as the dungeon master, it will be something that I dip into, or something that you dip into when it feels right. I'm not going to create adventures based off of it straight away. So there doesn't necessarily have to be this massive focus on the backstory. The backstory is there to help you create a more interesting character. If you are someone who goes, okay, well, I was born an orphan, I was raised by paladins, and I became a cleric. All right, over the course of the next few adventures, let's discover what was it like living in that monastery with the paladins. Who were your friends? So you can unpack it over time. Sometimes people try and put it all in before they get going. I think exploration is a lot of fun too. Kate Anshan says, I homebrewed a sub-race of elves for my campaign because I felt it would enrich the setting. but the players seemed concerned when I told them about it. Thoughts on how much homebrew is good? Homebrew is good when you tell your players about it beforehand. If you started the game already and, oh yeah, by the way, we had this homebrew and we had that homebrew and we had that homebrew, and so now your class is redundant. That's bad. That's bad. But if before they started creating characters, before session 0, you say, okay, so this is my world. I have homebrewed this race, and that race. You don't have to play them if you don't want to, but they are there if you so choose. And I have done this because of X, Y, and Z. There's a very interesting debate that happens in our review of Adventures of Middle-earth, where they've homebrewed some rules, and I had one player who was like, nah, I don't see the point. I don't like it. I don't know why. It's nah. Doesn't make sense. The rest of them went, well, okay, it's fine. You know, so you're always going to get people who look at things and go, well, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. And when you listen to his explanation as to why he doesn't like it, I have to agree with him. I think he's right. At the time, I didn't know that he was talking about it because we did these reviews in secret from one another to make sure that they're impartial. But yeah. So as long as they know beforehand, that's okay. That's okay. Now, we've got 6 minutes left. 6 minutes left of today's show. I do like the 2-hour show format, I must admit. Now, any more questions? Scorchclaw. More of a personal question. Have you ever thought about discussing disabilities in tabletop games? Personally, I suffer from times when my blood sugars simply won't cooperate, and it sometimes makes DMing more difficult and frustrating. Disabilities are contentious in terms of how do you handle them. Sexuality is contentious depending on how you handle them. So I think that one has to be aware of what your table is made up of. PTSD, for example, is something that one needs to be aware of. Rape is something, so when you start to look at these things, you go, okay, is it going to enhance the game? Yes. If my character has a this, or if the NPC has a that. So if that's your question in terms of creating characters who have disabilities and things along those lines. If you yourself have a disability, then I think it's also a case of being upfront about it and being open and honest about it at the table. I have many players who have told me over the course of their lifetime they have low-grade autism, for example. Oh, excuse me. So they don't pick up on social cues. So they need to be told how far is too far or not far enough, type of thing. So yes, it's those are things to bear in mind. Those are things to keep in mind. Is yeah, how far do you push it? Okay, so then next question is XP to level. Hello, XP to level 3. I've never asked you. Do you prefer running pre-written adventures or homebrew games worlds? No, to be perfect, immediately homebrew. Pre-written is for me often difficult, especially if the players have had access to beforehand. As a point in case, when you look at Ghosts of Saltmarsh or Descent into Avernus, there are the biggest role-playing company in the world. They said to me, "Here, run our games. Here are the pre-written adventures," and I went, "Yeah, I'm going to change them." And I think the reason why I do it is, I don't like being predictable. I don't like my players going, "Oh, okay, now we're going to go and do this. Now we're going to do that." Point number 1. Point number 2. I often find that when I plan too much, I get restricted. I get lost in my own thoughts. It's like, oh, what was I supposed to do now? What was this supposed? So I always take a step back and go, well, if I have loose planning sessions, loose ideas, then when things change tactic, when they change course, it's easier to adapt. So, yeah, homebrew for me is always a winner. Again, though, you look at Avernus, you look at Descent into Avernus, there are such cool ideas for adventures in there. And I have to admit that it is probably one of the first ones that I look at and I go, I like the flow that they've taken on this. But I also know that I am too much of an improvisational GM, and I humor my players too much that the very first adventure would be, I would add in a link or a something or a whatever to to build on the story that's going. If the players are having fun, the story's going to get bigger. I mean, for example, with Ghosts of Saltmarsh, the very first adventure, which was written in the 80s, it's a classic, the haunted mansion. You know, they had these giant weasels in the foliage outside, which was just to give a combat encounter in the original. To give a combat encounter, it was still there in Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and once I had read that, I was like, okay, that's cool. I'm going to do that. We had maps prepared. We had the whole thing done for us in Fantasy Grounds, and they came across before they even got to the weasels. I was like, but you know, the mansion is supposed to be haunted. And it would be a lot more interesting if these weasels were insane, because we've got a druid here who talks to animals a lot, and that could diffuse the situation. What drives them insane? Mad Hatter, lead. Lead makes you go insane. Where can I get lead from? What if the bandits were painting the weasels with white paint, which contained lead, and the lead had driven the weasels insane, but it also made it look like ghosts were running around in the fields? That ticks 2 boxes as to terms, why the mansion haunted. That's perfect. And so I get giant, insane, white painted weasels because of a random thought in my head as the characters are walking up to the frickin' mansion. So yeah, long and short of it, give me the story, give me the inspiration from the book. I mean, that's I love that. But then that's it. That's the last time you'll see that adventure. I might come back and bring in stuff like Antagonist. I was like, it's brilliant. What they've done is absolutely brilliant. But I want to know why. How did it happen? What happened? What led us there? So there we are. Okay, we've reached the end of today's show. It's been a lot of fun. I really have. Shadowzar says tabletop RPGs category. Maybe Guy should raid them as his stream ends. Oh, raiding. I'm such a bad twitcher, I must admit. I twitch really well, but I don't use the platform very well. Oh, XP to level 3. Thank you for that. Really thank you. I appreciate that. So let me just read what you've written there. I'm running both games and I feel very similarly. Yeah, I mean, but admit, well, I would hope that you would agree that they are very written and they're so rich and full of content. Yeah, I want to say if I had a game to sit around the table and just play forever, that would be amazing. And then I would play through either of them. So, but we were playing Adventures in Middle Earth, and I'm like, oh, I could do this a lot too. Anyway, we don't have enough time. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the stream. I'm going to try this raiding thing now, so it's probably going to break everything. Who was I supposed to raid? Pick a channel to raid or host, it says. There was a suggestion in chat called something. I don't know what the suggestion was. It's gone. Someone suggest something quickly. Yes, and to the rest of you, thank you for being part of the Kickstarter launch. I really appreciate it. And spread the word if you can. That would be great. Let's get that artwork in there so we can really make a super cool looking book. We'll catch you it's Tuesday here in Japan, so the next time we will see each other is perhaps for Descent into Avernus on Saturday. Great GM video coming out this week is looking obviously at nautical combat, nautical stuff, because we're launching the book, so it kind of makes sense for us to do that. And yes, we will take it from there. I've got several tabletop RPGs to raid. Loading Ready Run. I haven't ever watched them, so I don't know. Zombie Orpheus, I do know of. They're pretty cool. Lords of Avantris, I saw promoted. They've only got 16 people. Let's go and raid them, shall we? So I'm going to say let's raid them. I haven't watched their show before. But yes, thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this. And until next time, happy gaming.